Have you ever seen a magic trick and wondered what the heck you just saw? Well, it's not a magic trick, but be ready to feel confused beyond your understanding because Hoyoverse, what the heck is going on here? This guy has a wall of text that's a worthy match for even the Ocean-Hued Clam set. Luckily for you, I'm here to explain everything so that you won't have to read the essay that Hoyoverse decided to write for Lyney's skills. As usual, this guide will cover his best artifacts and weapons to general playstyle and team compositions. Without further ado, let's get this guide rolling. Lyney's kit revolves around bow charge attack similar to Ganyu or Tighnari's playstyle. His charged attack has a second charge level called a prop arrow. At the simplest level, prop arrows will summon a hat to taunt surrounding enemies, and if Lyney is above 60% HP, he will also consume 20% of his max HP to grant himself a stack of prop surplus to increase the damage of his next skill. The hat that taunts enemies will deal single target pyro damage when it is defeated or expires after 4 seconds. Because only one hat can exist on the field at a time unless you have his first constellation, creating a new hat with another charge attack will destroy the existing hat and cause it to deal pyro damage to an enemy early. As Lyney fires his special charge attack, he will also occasionally deal an extra hit of pyro damage, which the game calls a Spirit Breath Thorn. The animation looks like a sword plunging into the ground, and this is a very weak hit of pyro damage, mainly used for its pneuma properties related to the pneuma and ousia system with Fontaine's exploration. Lyney's skill will deal AoE pyro damage in front of him, restore HP, and detonate any hats present on the field for AoE damage instead of single target damage. Not only do prop surplus stacks increase the damage of the skill, but they also increase the HP regen that Lyney gets, so it's important to finish off Lyney's rotation with his skill rather than start his rotation with the skill. On the other hand, Lyney's elemental burst is flexible and can be used to start off his rotation or in the middle of his rotation. During the 3 seconds that he turns into a cat in a hat, you can move around and the hat will deal pyro damage to any nearby enemies, but only once per enemy. To finish off the 3 seconds of the burst, or if you cancel it early, the cat will explode for AoE pyro damage, grant Lyney a stack of prop surplus, and summon a hat identical to the ones created from his special charge attack. Other things to note about Lyney's kit are that his first ascension talent will grant him 3 extra energy and extra damage for his charge attack if he consumes his HP, and his second ascension talent will grant him a massive 60% damage bonus against enemies affected by pyro. His second ascension talent is the focal point of his team building because it further increases the extra damage against pyro inflicted enemies by 20% for every pyro teammate that Lyney is paired with. As you'll see in the team section later on, Lyney is a prime candidate for mono pyro teams, and certain pyro teammates will emerge as the clear best options for Lyney's pairings. Lyney is a standard pyro DPS character with no obscure scalings based on other stats like HP or defense. For artifact sets, the new Marechaussee Hunter is tailor-made for Lyney's playstyle and is the best option by far. The 2 set is a straight up damage increase to his charge attacks, but the 4 set grants a 12% crit rate buff for any change in his HP, up to 36% crit rate at the maximum 3 stacks. This is a ridiculous artifact set for Lyney because he can consume his HP and it takes a lot of burden off chasing crit rate in artifact substats, allowing endgame players to optimize for crit damage and also allowing early game players to have an easier time building him. Although the gap between Marechaussee Hunter and other artifact sets is over 10% damage, there are still plenty of serviceable substitutes. Notably, you'll want to pay attention to any combination of the 2-set Crimson Witch, 2-set Marechaussee Hunter, and 2 sets that offer 18% attack with their consistency and ability to easily transition into the full 4-set Marechaussee. Sets that perform around the same level as the 2-set combinations include the 4-set Lavawalker, 4-set Vermilion Hereafter, and the 4-set Wanderer's Troop, but don't go out of your way to farm them over the Marechaussee set. The 4-set Lavawalker is an unexpected surprise considering how memed on this set is, but the only downside is that against enemies infused with elements such as slimes or hypostases, your damage plummets compared to the 4-set Marechaussee. Assuming you open up your rotation with your elemental burst, then the 4-set Vermilion Hereafter gets around the same results as a 4-set Lavawalker does against pyro-afflicted enemies, which is a great benchmark to be at for this set considering its consistency and controllability. Unfortunately, Vermilion suffers from the fact that its domain is not so resin efficient because a few characters can use the 4-set Vermilion or Echoes of an Offering, so it's unlikely that you'll have good pieces laying around. The The 4-set Wanderer's Troop does have a slightly lower damage ceiling than Vermilion or Lavawalker, but it's the safest option given that the game will hand you plenty of pieces through normal activities such as your weekly bosses. Having this option without actually diverting resin from the Marechaussee domain is a good thing to note for anyone trying to build Lyney. As for artifact stats, they are a lot simpler than artifact sets. You'll always want to go for the standard attack percent in the Sands, pyro damage in the Goblet, and crit damage in the Circlet because he already gets so much crit rate from his Ascension and the 4-set Marechaussee. Lyney usually needs around 130% energy recharge in artifact substats to use his burst every rotation, with the assumption that you have one other pyro character in the party that also generates energy. So aside from crit stats, which are always at the top of the substat priority list, try to focus as much energy recharge and attack percent as possible. With the plethora of new weapons introduced with Fontaine, Lyney has a lot of bows to consider. It should come as no surprise that his signature 5-star bow, the First Great Magic, is better than any other option because of its mono-element tailored passive, but there are a lot of other options available if you don't want to spend primos on the weapon banner. For the bow that comes quite close to his signature weapon in damage ceiling, Aqua Simulacra is the no-brainer considering its massive crit damage stat and easy to abuse passive. An option like Thundering Pulse that has crit damage but also has a mediocre passive for Lyney, or a great value bow like Scoured Harp that gives a good mix of attack, crit rate, and crit damage still outperform all other 4-star bows but are a little farther in power compared to the First Great Magic. The best 4-star bow for Lyney is an R5 prototype Crescent, assuming the enemy has a weak point because a 72% attack buff is just ridiculous on a bow passive. Bows that usually perform around the same power level as an R5 Crescent include Polar Star because Lyney already gets so much crit rate, Amos Bow for its large attack percent that can match Prototype Crescent's passive, and the new BP bow Scion of the Blazing Sun. The new BP bow at R5 is a pretty good option for Lyney, increasing charge attack damage against a single enemy for 10 seconds. The only issue with this bow is that getting it to R5 does take a lot of time and a minimum of $50 US. It may be better to spend your Dream Solvents and Billets while saving yourself $50 since Prototype Crescent and Scion of the Blazing Sun are almost equivalent in damage at the same refinement level. Aside from the options I listed, nothing else really should be mentioned in the 4-star category aside from 2 options. First, the new craftable Song of Stillness is good on Lyney in theory, but it is simply outclassed by Prototype Amber, so Song of Stillness should be a craftable that is only justified for drip or aesthetic purposes. Second, Blackcliff Warbow is a fantastic Star Glitter option for crit damage if you're out of bow prototypes and serves as a secondary free-to-play option to Prototype Crescent. Thanks to Lyney's second Ascension passive, he is an extremely straightforward character to build around. However, he is a hyper carry that completely relies on a mono pyro team to compete with other hyper carry characters, meaning his options are quite limited. The general framework for a Lyney team either has 2 pyro characters and 1 animo character with the 4-set Viridescent Veneerer, or 1 pyro character, 1 non-pyro shielder, and 1 animo character again. The best pyro support for Lyney is, to no one's surprise, Bennett. Not only is Bennett providing a huge damage boost in the form of an attack buff, but he's also healing Lyney every time he consumes his HP down to 60% when using a charge attack, allowing him to generate more prop surplus stacks. Since there is no other true pyro healer in the game aside from Bennett, naturally you're going to need some other utility to fill the other pyro slot or even replace Bennett if he's already occupied by another team. As the Pyro DPS Archon, Xiangling can provide some nice AoE damage that Lyney lacks with his charge attacks, and also apply Pyro onto nearby enemies for Lyney to fully benefit from with his Ascension talent. C4 Yanfei, Toma, and Xinyan are all fantastic for Lyney because they provide shields to prevent him from getting interrupted during his charge attacks. With Toma, just keep in mind that you won't be getting full value out of his shielding because Lyney can only utilize Toma's elemental skill shielding and not his elemental burst shielding because his rotation never uses normal attacks to stack Toma's shield. Although not perfect, Deha is the final pyro character to have some synergy with Lyney as a teammate. Her skill deals coordinated attack damage and will apply pyro onto enemies for Lyney to utilize, as well as provide resistance to interruption for better charge attack windows. If you decide to only pick one of these pyro characters for Lyney, then the shielders from other elements are also valuable teammates in the third slot to ensure you do not get interrupted during your charge attacks. Specifically, characters like Kirara, Baiju, Zhongli, Diona, or Layla provide minimal interference with the Pyro application needed for Lyney's Ascension talent, and provide much needed interruption resistance and damage mitigation with their shields. And of course, aside from Kazuha in the final slot, no other character really has outstanding support for Lyney beyond the 4-set Viridescent Veneerer, and pretty much any off-field Animo support can be played in this final slot. If you want to play a canonical team, then Lynette does have a small attack percent buff on her elemental burst and serves as a decent Animo support for your Lyney team, so don't be afraid to pair the Simpleaks together if you did get both on the banner. If you want example teams to model after, my personal triple Pyro team consists of Lyney, Bennett, Xiangling, and Kazuha for maximum damage. Meanwhile, my mixed element team consists of Lyney, Bennett, Kirara, and Lynette to play with some of my favorite new characters with Kirara and Lynette, but also to maximize the element diversity for Lynette's attack buff. With that, I have nothing else to discuss, so let me know your thoughts, builds, and teams for Lyney down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this guide or thought it was useful, be sure to support both the video and the channel. The goal is 30k by the end of the year, and with your help, we can reach that goal. Other than that, it's the same as always. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.